this lecture is covering chapter 14 and 15. I kind of combined them together and simplified them a lot. So it's just kind of the main, very basic ideas from these two chapters. And for the test, really focus on the PowerPoint for this one. Most of the questions from this are just going to be really general. So this lecture is looking at different host defense mechanisms. Alright, so host defense mechanisms, they can be divided into innate and acquired. So innate host defense mechanisms, these are mechanisms that are present at birth. So we're just born with them. Whereas acquired host defense mechanisms, these are mechanisms that we pick up over time through experience or as we run into different infectious agents. In addition to being innate and acquired, some host defense mechanisms are nonspecific and others are more specific. So your nonspecific defense mechanisms, they protect against many harmful substances. So they're not to protect you from one specific type of bacteria, they're to help protect you from lots of different types of bacteria or other infectious agents. Specific host defense mechanisms, they are made to protect you against a very specific pathogen. So like one type of bacteria or one type of virus. So that's the nonspecific versus the specific. So if we look at our different host defense mechanisms, we have innate mechanisms we're born with that are nonspecific. So these ones we're born with them, and they're defense mechanisms that protect us from a lot of different illnesses. And these include the first line of defense and the second line of defense. Whereas if you look to the right, we can have acquired host defense mechanisms that are very specific. So these are things that we get over time through experience, and they're for very specific types of pathogens. And this is called our third line of defense. So we're going to be looking at these three lines of defense, kind of what's in the lines of defense and how they work. Okay, so in our first line of defense, remember these are innate, non-specific defenses, so we're born with them, and they help protect us from a lot of different illnesses. And there's basically three types, or three categories of our first line. So we have physical defenses, chemical, and genetic. So the first line, physical defenses, this is basically our skin and our mucous membranes. So this is the very outside part of our bodies that are exposed to the environment. So very few pathogens are actually able to penetrate intact skin and mucous membrane. So skin, it's really hard for pathogens to get in there, unless if you have a cut or something like that. So this is our physical line of defense, is the skin. And in our mucous membrane, so if something gets breathed into our mouth or into our nasal cavity, then we have more types of physical defense. So we have microvilli, which help trap bacteria and prevent them from getting deeper into the tissues. And then in addition, on our skin, we have this microbial antagonism that I've talked about in the previous chapters in this unit. So this is when your endogenous microflora, your normal microflora, they prevent colonization of new arrivals or potential pathogens. And that's just because your normal flora is taking up all of the space, all of the sites, all of the nutrients on your skin, and it prevents the new arrivals from colonizing there, from finding a place to live. And so we have competition for sites and nutrients. Your normal flora, in addition to just taking up space, they can also produce lethal substances that will kill these new arrivals before they can colonize onto your skin. Chemical lines of defense. So skin, it's not only a physical barrier, but skin is also, it's really dry, and it has a specific pH and temperature that inhibits the colonization of a lot of pathogens. So we have sweat that has chemicals in it to kill pathogens, helps keep that pH at a really high temperature, so it helps to prevent pathogens from getting on there and taking over and growing. So different types of chemicals. So in perspiration, we also have tears and saliva. In those liquids or body fluids, we have certain enzymes. So we have lysozymes in our perspiration and our saliva, and it hydrolyzes peptidoglycan. And if you remember, peptidoglycan makes up bacteria cell walls. So if we destroy the peptidoglycan in the bacteria cell walls, it destroys the bacteria. So lysozymes are used to destroy bacteria. Another type of enzyme, defensin, this lyses microbes. It basically kills the microbes and causes them to break open. In addition to the perspiration, the tears, the saliva, on our skin and mucous membranes, if we eat something that's contaminated, those bacteria have to survive our stomach acids, and our stomach pH is around 2, which is very, very low. And they also have to survive the bile in the stomach and intestines. So there's a lot that pathogens have to get through in order to colonize and to cause us to get sick. The last part of the first line is just our genetics. So some individuals are, all individuals are genetically different from each other unless if you're identical twins. So therefore, some individuals have protection from infections by certain pathogens, and this is just based on genetics. Okay, so that was very briefly our first line of defense. So now we can kind of look at our second line of defense, which is also innate and nonspecific. Our second line of defense is where we start to get into immunology. So our immune system, it kind of has three main functions to it. So the first function is just surveillance. So your immune system sends out white blood cells to kind of just survey your body to watch out for infections, like pathogens, for example. In addition to this traveling around for surveillance, the immune system has to recognize self versus non-self. So it has to know what belongs in the body and what does not belong in the body. So if we look at the top, so we have a white blood cell, which is in the purple, and then we have normal cells, which are kind of brownish with the purple nucleus in them. If the white blood cells run into normal or self cells, the white blood cell recognizes that, and then the white blood cell just says, okay, they're fine, there's no reaction. Whereas if the white blood cell runs into a pathogen, it can recognize that the pathogen is non-self, it doesn't belong there, and then that pathogen can do its third function. It has to destroy the non-self. So those white blood cells will engulf the pathogen and destroy it, or break it down and kill it. So this immunology part looks at the white blood cells and kind of how they're traveling around, making sure everything is supposed to be in the body. If it's not supposed to be there, it's going to attack and destroy it. Another part to the second line of defense is inflammation. So if you have an injury, like this finger is getting pricked by a thorn, you're going to have 5 things that happen. So you're going to have rubor, which is redness, calor, which is the warmth part of it, tumor, which is swelling, so you're going to start to get swelling, fluids going to start going to the area, dolor, which is pain, and then you're going to get loss of function, which is the 5th part of inflammation. So the function of inflammation is that you want to mobilize and attract your immune components. So you want to send out signals to your white blood cells that they should get to the injury as fast as possible to take care of any potential pathogen. It also sets in motion any mechanisms to repair the tissue damage and to clear away those harmful substances. And once your immune components are there, they're going to destroy or block the microbes from getting further into the tissue, from invading that area. So I talked a little bit about white blood cells. What white blood cells actually do is called phagocytosis. So white blood cells, as they're going to travel around surveying the tissues, they're going to ingest and destroy any non-self, and then they can extract something called antigens from what they destroy. So antigens and antibodies. Antigens are large foreign substances that are found on pathogens. So the white blood cells are going to extract these antigens. They're going to look at the antigens, and then they're going to use them to produce antibodies. So antibodies are secreted by white blood cells, and they help those white blood cells search and destroy the antigens. So antigens and antibodies, they kind of go together. Antibodies are what our body produces in order to destroy any more antigens later on. Okay, so we have our innate, non-specific defense mechanisms. We have the first line of defense, which is the physical, chemical, genetic. Second line of defense, which is immunology, inflammation. And then the third line of defense is what we acquire over time, and it's more specific. So acquired immunity, there is natural immunity. So natural immunity is acquired through normal life experiences. It's not induced through any medical needs, so just living life, getting sick, for example. Under natural immunity, you can have active immunity. This is when you get a illness and your immune system responds to that microbe and is able to fight it off later. Passive immunity, that's natural. This is when you get it from a person that made it, so immunity from one person to another. So breastfeeding is a really good example of this. Breast milk has a lot of protective qualities to it that is passed on from the mother to the child. So besides the natural immunity, you can also acquire immunity by artificial means. This is done through any type of medical procedure, so immunizations. Active immunity, this is like a vaccination. So you're vaccinated with part of the microbe, and then your body can react to the microbe. The passive immunity, this is when you are injected with immunity that's made from another person up here. So vaccination is more active because your body has to respond to the vaccination. The passive immunity that's artificial is you just get things into your body to help make you immune to certain types of infections.